Hey Floss Tube, it's Kerry Stitches. It's Friday, I don't know what date it is. Friday the 8th? Friday the 8th of January. This is Stitch With Me number 4. Today I'm going to be doing the cross-stitch, Confessions of a Cross-Stitch tag from Vintage Chic Stitcher. I've talked about this in my last video. I'll link it below and all that, you know. Yeah, so yes, where there are beads is crooked on the wall. I didn't realise until I put it up and I was like, ah, and it's on command strips. And yes, oh well, never mind. Yeah, so I'm going to go through that tag. Today I'm stitching on Santa's House. Oh, that doesn't look like Santa's House by Prairie Schooler. I am restitching the Vid-Eye Frog last night. So anyway, this also counts for my WhipGo board. So welcome to my first WhipGo project. The tag has 27 questions. Some are quick, some aren't. We'll go through and, you know, see what happens, and I will pull this down a little bit so I can actually see the... Ooh. There we go. Covers it a bit better. I can actually see the deer's leg now. Right, so question 1 is just cross stitch or speciality stitches too? I love me a specialty stitch somewhere. I don't mind. I threw Smyrna crosses into flamingo bells, or whichever one it was recently. So yeah, I don't mind. I don't know many Smith stitches. I do have like a full embroidery stitch book upstairs, so I can always look at them. And I've got a few projects with various stitches in this year. I've got a Chessie and Me project that's got 2 new to me stitches, so I'm looking forward to learning those as I go along. And so, and you know, I love my black work, so that often involves speciality stitches too. Whole stitches only, or half and quarter stitches too. If they're called for, I'll stitch them. I tend to be drawn more to whole stitch charts. That's just the kind of style I like, I think. But I mean, and this comes into the next 3 questions, this next 2 questions too. Alice had fractionals, I think Alice had fractionals in it. I did them. Can't say I like them, but I mean, they are what they are. If the design calls for them, then I'll stitch them. French knots or beads in their place? 99% of the time it's beads in their place. I like beads. I mean, and I'm happy to adjust to the petite beads if necessary, just to get the right kind of scale and everything. So yeah, I don't mind. I can do French knots. I did a bookmark with 128 of them in. I'm just not a huge fan of them. I'm very hit and miss, and I know it's probably because of the needle and all that. I know the theory. I like beads. I like throwing beads on things, especially at Christmas. Backstitch, can't speak. Nemesis or friend? Alice, Nemesis. I hated the backstitch on Alice, but generally I don't mind it. I get really frustrated at the backstitch that doesn't follow, doesn't go hole to hole. That annoys me, especially if I'm stitching on Ada, but you know, it's what it is. It's usually there for a reason. Washed or unwashed? I don't tend to wash many projects, truth be told, not unless I need to. So I think stitching with a lot more fancy floss these days does tend to mean that or on hand-dyed fabrics less and less are eligible for washing. Iron or what's an iron? Stitching in hand generally means I do need to iron my projects. Occasionally I can get away with it. Biscornings I don't tend to iron. They tend to be okay, but usually, I mean, like this one will eventually need an iron because of me rolling it up a bit. So usually, and especially if I'm going to frame a big piece, I will iron it. My iron generally gets used for craft projects more than like clothes. In fact, I can't remember the last item of clothing I ironed. It probably comes alongside the fact we've been nowhere in the last year, but generally my iron is there for craft projects. Okay. Professionally framed or do it yourself? DIY all the way. I have discovered my local frame shop does custom frames, and as you saw in Main Street, they do a really nice job of making custom frames really reasonably. So I will continue to buy custom frames and where needed. And yeah, I've got the one. I have the one for Alice here. You think that's an odd colour, but yeah, I've got the one for Alice ready to go. She just needs to get it in the frame. Okay. So FFO things in frames or do other finishes? Well, as you will know, I'll FFO in always shapes and forms. So what other finishes have you done? So these were just the ones I could think of off the top of my head. I reckon we've got flat fold pillows, drums, like the flat mounts, biscorno in various sizes and shapes. I've done stockings, cards, like things like coasters and key rings and stuff like that. Cube finishes, bell pulls. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. A stickler for the pattern or a creative muse? Generally, I follow the pattern. I'm not a huge one for diverting, but you know, judge each pattern on its merit. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So yeah. Organised stitcher or ruler of chaos? I'd say fairly organised. I'm not very good at keeping my planner up to date and things like that, I will say. I've just realised my hand's been covering the stitching the whole time. Sorry. Perils of being left-handed. I probably should have the camera at that angle, but it's just not practical. So yes, I'm sorry you were seeing my hand for most of this. Yeah, I think most of the time I do follow the pattern. If I've made a mistake or something and I need to jiggle something around a bit, I will do. I'm not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But generally I follow the pattern. That's why I've like, you know, if I'm going to stitch on it, it's probably why I like it. So, I mean, obviously, Main Street's the main one that I've done my own thing with. So I made lots and lots and lots of changes to that. But the pattern, you know, the bones of the pattern were just there just to enable me to do it. So it was a very good and fairly easy one to be able to change. So oh, okay, I've gone back to them. Okay. Apologies for family noise. We're in lockdown. Everybody's home. Nobody's going anywhere. Yeah, I'm fairly organised with the organised question. Yeah, I think. I can usually put my hand on things most of the time. 6. Planned or spontaneous? I do have spontaneous starts-ish, but they tend to be a little bit planned. Like I might go like on Wednesday. Yes, I will join in with your salon Saturday if I've got the stuff. But fairly planned. I do have a decent enough stash, but as we will talk about later. But yeah. I don't like having tons and tons of WIP, so I won't suddenly generally get up in the morning and go, I think I'll start this today. I do occasionally, but not very often. So, yeah, don't look at, oh, yeah, the back of this is horrendous where I had to sort my giant mistake out yesterday. This deer happened to be too wide and too long. Right. Process stitcher or project driven? I love the process of stitching. I mean, that's why we do it, because we love the stitching. But I do love a finish. So that's probably why I tend to stitch smaller projects and only ever have 2 or 3 big ones on the go at a time. So I'd say probably 80% project or finish, project driven. Although I love the process. Impulse buyer or thoughtful purchaser? Generally thoughtful. I don't spend a huge amount on cross stitch, so I tend to be quite thoughtful in my purchases. I don't buy a huge number of charts. I bought myself the grand total of 2 project bags that I paid for actually, no, 1 project bag that I bought for myself. The other one I had mostly birthday money with, so yeah, and others are Christmas money. So I'd say that I complete stitch from stash every year, and I'm always in the black. So probably tells you a lot about my buying habits. If you make a mistake, do you have to frog it out? Not if I can help it. If I can fudge it, I can. This I couldn't, because the deer was 2 stitches that way, and it was touching the poinsettia because they're mirrored. I wasn't happy with it, and he was too long as well, so that had to go. But as you can see from the back, I was literally pulling out 2 or 3 stitches each side and tucking them all back in, rather than ripping out the entire thing and starting again. So, and as needles dance, when I frogged and restitched and frogged and restitched and frogged and restitched, yeah, if I can get away with it, I will. I don't like frogging. And if it's one odd stitch and a wrong colour, I may well just stitch over the top of it. That's kind of how I am. Okie dokie, where are we at? So this is called the moment of truth section. Have you ever shown your work? If not, would you like to? I've thought about it. We don't have big, well, we do have big state, and I'm just kind of like, nah, I can't be bothered. So I don't think my stitching is perfect enough for that. I'm not saying I'm not happy with it, and I'm happy to make gifts and things like that, but I wouldn't say I was. I don't want somebody going, you carried your stitches 2 stitches over the back. Yes, I know I did. Well, it was too short, so it doesn't really bother me. And I'd worry about a piece getting lost. That's kind of why I won't let the framers do anything, because I'd worry about something getting ruined if it's not in my hands or in the person's hands. It should be. I made a mistake again then. I was going to cry. Okay, where are we at? Do you stitch for, who do you stitch for? I stitch for me most of the time. I will stitch, well, I stitch for my sister-in-law and brother-in-law. I did coasters I've done a couple of little bits for my parents-in-law. My mum has a few pieces of mine. I'll stitch for swaps and for my stitchy friends. But generally, I need to know that person's going to appreciate what I've done, because I've been burnt in the past. So, and not just with stitchy gifts, but piece of jewellery or cards, even scrapbooks and things like that. So yeah. If you stitch gifts, are they delivered on time or are they fashionably late? They're usually on time, or thereabouts. If a swap is late, there is generally a reason for it. So I'm fairly good at keeping to schedule stitching wise. Is there any place on earth you'd like to stitch? New Zealand's one place I'd always love to travel to. And of course I take my stitching, because it's a 24-hour flight. I'd take my stitching with me, of course. But one place I'd love to be at a retreat with my favourite Zoom girls. To stitch for them in person, not via Zoom. That's the one thing I'd love to do that. What's the strangest place you've stitched? Crash test days for work. That's car crash days, like test days. I've stitched there. I've stitched at Wimbledon tennis tournaments. The Needle Museum, I stitched there. That was fun. There we go. I don't know what else. Oh no, planes. No, actually, I've never stitched on a plane. Trains, buses, coaches, I've stitched on. In the car. Not stitched on a boat yet. Oh, what do you call it? Whitby Abbey. I stitched at that. Stitched there. I've stitched on the beach. I've stitched pretty much anywhere. I've usually got stitching in my bag. You know, way back when we were allowed to leave the house. You know, in the last year, the most exotic place I've stitched is in the garden. Okay. If you could only stitch one project monogamously for a year, what would it be? I don't know. Could I say this Blackbird design stockings? Maybe. There's 35 that I need to stitch, so they'd probably keep me going and have enough variety, and they would be small enough that I'd still get the finishes. Maybe those. So it's kind of a series rather than just a one piece. If I could get away with that, because I think it would drive me mad to stitch like cardinal points or one of my BAPs constantly. Maybe Huckleberry Farm I could deal with, because that's really, really pretty and lots of little smaller things. But I don't know. Not that Huckleberry Farm's a BAP yet, a whip yet, but this year. Okay. What is the total amount? What's the most amount of whips you've had at once? Today's count of 26. That's the most whips I've ever had. I don't usually get much above 20. I tend to average in the mid-teens, which suits me. As I say, I know I started a lot of things this year, but I am hoping to whip down over the year. I pulled one of the questions that's coming up. I did have a flick through some charts today and pulled 3 that I'd like to start this year. So I think I've got a total of maybe 15 things picked for this year. Oh, what's the next one? What's my oldest active whip? That's Elizabeth Shepherd, and it was 3 on New Year's Day. I hope those feet line up now. Okay. Honestly, tell us about your stash. How many charts and kits do you have? Generally, not overly sure. Ballpark figures. I did count the charts and chart books, and I think it's around 175 to 200 charts. That includes things that are kitted up and things I've stitched, because I'm a bit of a chart hoarder. I reckon maybe 50 kits. That includes like some of the small little Mouse Loft and Hobbycraft mini kits. and bigger kits, 100 cover kits maybe from magazines, and some 400 magazines or so. I know I counted them last year roughly. Obviously I've added a few to that, you know, a year's worth of magazines, so, but I only sub to one now, so it's only going up by 13 a year now. So yeah, about 400. I don't, as I said, you know, this is 15, yeah, I'll say how old's the boy, 15 years worth of stuff I've accumulated, so I don't think that's overly horrendous amount of stuff. Okay, truth. Which designers or designs do you just not get? I'm not sure there's anything out there I don't get. I mean, I think there is pretty much a place for every type of stitching. That's what makes stitching, you know, so great, because there's always something for everyone. Just realised this is 3 strap. No, it's not. Nearly had a disaster then. Did that the other day as well. Stitching away with 4 strands before I realised that I hadn't, you know, pulled the thread up in the needle a bit more. Yeah, there's anything I don't get. There are things that I'm not a fan of. But I think everything has its place. I'm not some of the, I'm not so keen on some of the maybe more anatomy driven ones that are, you know, very lifelike, let's say. I'm not so keen on that, but for, you know, they have all has a place in what we do. So there are going to be people out there who just go, I really don't get the point of prim stitching, or why you'd want to stitch a reproduction sampler. I just don't understand why you want to copy something. You know, it's so subjective. At the end of the day, it's an art what we do, and that's why it is subjective. Any designers that you absolutely adore and cannot live without? Again, I have several things by several designers that I love. I've got lots of Lizzie Kates. I've got lots of Bent Creek. I own several Blackbird design patterns now, or the booklets and things. But even with Blackbird, where we know they go out of print and things like that, I'm not going to rush out and buy every single thing just because, you know, because it has a scarcity factor to it. I'll buy it if I like it and I think I'm going to stitch something from it. But, you know, generally I go on the design rather than the designer. Yes, I have signed up for newsletters from lots of people. But I'll tend to go, I like that design, it doesn't matter who the designer is. So that's kind of how I look at it. I love heartstring samplery, I really do. And things like Consider the Lilies and His Eyes on the Sparrow. Do I have them? No, but they are beautiful, beautiful designs. They really are. And maybe one day. I need to count. We'll go that way. No, we won't. We'll leave that stitch. Okay. 2 questions to go. So, how many hours do I devote to stitching a week? I reckon 20 to 30. 3 hours most evenings. And then, so that's 21. And then maybe sometimes I'll get an hour in the day as well. So potentially 28. Might be as many 35 actually. You know, some Saturdays I will sit and stitch for 6 hours or 7 hours, which I'm planning on doing this weekend. So yeah, 20 to 30, 35 hours, something like that. I don't tend to keep track that well. I usually start stitching around 8 p.m, 7:30 to 8 p.m, depending on whether I'm chatting with one of my friends or not. And then usually stitch till about 11, 10:30. Some days it's 2 hours, some days it's 4. I think I was nearly midnight last night, so it varies. So let's go 20 to 30, 35, something like that. Just depends. My stitching hours have definitely increased this year. I'm on average getting an hour in the daytime most days now, because I tend to finish work about 2:30. And obviously at the moment we're not doing school runs, so hence why I'm recording this in the afternoon, even though it's pretty much dark outside. Thank goodness for the ring light. It might be a bit shadowy, I'm afraid. Can't really tell that. So and I think Zooming with my friends has helped a lot, just for me to get a lot more stitching timing, because I have a habit of scrolling. I'm a doom scroller. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the news, check my emails, and back again in a loop, whilst answering messages as well. You know, it's that kind of, I'm terrible for it and I really should stop. So it does help chatting with my friends, because I don't do it half as much. Last question. Does your significant other really know how much you spend on your craft? And now we did chat about this one, because I think that's only fair. I don't want him suddenly editing my video and going, oh, I didn't know this. No, he said he doesn't generally know. Not that he's worried, because he knows I don't tend to hide anything. We're like, look, new fabric. And he's like, lovely, it's brown. You know, look, fabric, floss. And he's like, yeah, great. Doesn't care. I get really excited about my purchases. He bought me Hubs bought me project bags for Christmas, so he knows exactly how much they cost. So yeah, as I say, I do stitch from stash. So the fact that I do stitch from stash, and it's, I don't spend a huge amount. I want one fabric of the month subscription, my one magazine subscription, so it's all good. So he doesn't know, but he knows it's not excessive. So I think that's probably about the best way of putting it. And I've lost where I am. Okay. So there we go. So those are the Confessions of a Cross Stitcher tag from Jo at Vintage Chic Stitcher, and they date back to 2016. So I will put a link down below if you want to do any of these. Feel free to tell me if you were surprised by any of the answers. Or if you'd have, you know, thought I was far more chaotic than I really am. I mean, everything's got a project bag. I keep an active whip list. I can tell you at any point how many whips I have. So, you know, if you, my DMC is all, you know, is alphabetically. My fancy floss and DMC is numerical. My fancy floss is alphabetical. All my charts are in one. You know, yeah, I'd say I'm fairly organised. Although this is my current, you know, for this, that's how I've organised my floss, and that's how it'll go back in the project bag, because they're not similar colours. Yeah. So that's that. So what we on 30 minutes. I think that'll do for today. For that's my stitch with me. Yeah, thanks for watching. Have a great stitchy week, and I will see you all again for my regular update next week. Take care and happy stitching, my friends. Bye bye.